She had always loved the quiet moments when her fingers brushed the piano keys. The soft click and the warm sound that followed were her favorite parts of the day. She spent hours alone, practicing in her small room, imagining that someone somewhere would one day hear her play and be touched by the music. But until now, that had never happened. Her piano was her private world, a place where she could escape the noise of life. One morning, she received a note that made her heart skip a beat. A local music gathering was happening in her town, a casual event where musicians of all levels came to perform. The note said that they would love for her to come and play. They even mentioned that a simple tune would be enough for the audience. She paused and read it again. A simple tune? They didn't know the hours she had spent practicing, the notes she had memorized, the melodies she had imagined. But she smiled softly and decided she would go. On the day of the event, she dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were comfortable yet neat. She wanted to feel herself, not someone she was pretending to be. Her mind was racing, full of questions and excitement. What if she made a mistake? What if the audience didn't like her? She took a deep breath and reminded herself that music was about feeling, about sharing a piece of her heart with anyone willing to listen. The hall was small but bright, filled with chairs that were slowly being taken by the audience. The smell of polished wood and faint flowers hung in the air. She could hear other musicians warming up, the soft plucking of strings, the tapping of drums, and the quiet hum of voices practicing. She felt a mixture of nerves and calm. She was ready to play, but not yet ready for the world to see her as she truly was. When it was her turn, she walked toward the piano, her step steady despite the pounding of her heart. She could see the curious faces in the audience, some whispering, some smiling politely, and some looking skeptical. The host approached her with a kind smile and said, "We'd love for you to play a basic tune, something simple, just to get started." She nodded, understanding that they didn't know her abilities, but she did. She was ready to show them something, even if it was just a small part of her talent. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her fingers gently on the keys. The room quieted in anticipation, and she closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the piano beneath her hands. She started with the simple tune they had requested, a melody that seemed ordinary to anyone else but familiar to her. As she played, she noticed the audience shifting slightly, some nodding, some glancing round. She kept her focus, letting the music flow naturally, her fingers moving as if they had a mind of their own. The tune sounded basic, just as they had asked, but there was a softness in her touch, a careful attention to the rise and fall of each note. It was gentle, like a quiet conversation between her and the piano. She felt the music filling the room, wrapping around the listeners in a way that made the ordinary melody feel warmer, more alive. She didn't rush, she didn't push, she simply let the tune breathe. For a few moments, everything felt ordinary, like any other performance. But she knew what was coming next. She had a plan, a small spark of courage that she had been nurturing for years. She would take this simple tune and let it grow, let it become something more than anyone expected. She could feel it building inside her, a quiet excitement, a rush of energy that made her heart beat faster. She took a deep breath, feeling the keys beneath her fingertips, and began to play with more expression. She added small flourishes, gentle variations, tiny shifts in rhythm that made the tune dance. The audience began to notice, leaning forward, curious about the subtle changes. She smiled slightly, keeping her eyes on the piano, letting her fingers lead the way. She didn't speak, didn't announce anything. She simply let the music tell the story. The hall seemed to change around her. The sounds of the piano filled every corner, carrying a warmth and a lightness that made the listeners pause. Some closed their eyes, letting the melody wash over them. Some whispered quietly to their neighbors, wondering who this musician was and where she had been hiding her talent. She played as if the room didn't exist, as if it were just her and the piano, sharing a secret that only they could hear. She felt a sense of freedom, a feeling she had never experienced before. The basic tune had become a canvas, and she painted on it with every note, every pause, every gentle touch. She could sense the audience's surprise, their growing admiration, but she didn't let it distract her. She was in the moment, completely absorbed, letting her emotions guide her hands. When she finally finished the tune, there was a brief silence, a pause where the audience seemed to catch their breath. She looked up and saw eyes wide with wonder, faces turned toward her in amazement. The host was smiling, a little stunned, and some people were even whispering excitedly to each other. She had expected a simple nod or polite applause, But this reaction was far beyond anything she had imagined. She stood up slowly, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the lights in the hall. She had shared a piece of herself, and it had touched others. For the first time, she realized that her music could do more than fill a quiet room. It could reach out, connect, and inspire. And this was only the beginning. Walking away from the piano, she felt lighter, freer, like she had just taken a step into a new world. The experience had given her confidence, a quiet assurance that her music mattered. She knew there would be more performances, more chances to share her gift, and she was ready. The simple tune had been a door, and she had just opened it to something much bigger. She smiled to herself, knowing that the piano was no longer just a friend in her room, but a voice that could speak to anyone willing to listen. She returned to her seat after the brief applause, her heart still racing. The small audience murmured among themselves, surprised by the unexpected quality of her playing. She kept her hands folded in her lap, pretending to be calm, but inside, she felt a storm of excitement. She had played the basic tune they asked for, but she could already sense the shift in the room. The air had changed, and so had the expectations of the listeners. She looked around and noticed a few people leaning forward, trying to catch every subtle movement of her fingers. Some were whispering softly to their neighbors, expressing their surprise. She realized that even a simple tune could reveal a lot if played with feeling. She had spent years learning how to pour emotion into every note, how to make a melody speak without saying a word, and now, even in its simplest form, the tune seemed alive to them. The host walked past her, a gentle smile on his face. "You played beautifully," he said quietly. Even that simple tune felt special. She nodded politely, not wanting to reveal too much. But her mind was already moving ahead. She knew that what had just happened was only the beginning. The basic tune had opened a door, and she was ready to explore what lay beyond it. As she waited for the next part of the event, she observed the other musicians performing. Some were older, some younger, and they all had different styles. Some relied on speed and technical skill, others on emotion and nuance. She felt a strange connection to all of them, a silent understanding that music was the language that united them. But she also knew that her next opportunity, whenever it came, would be her chance to show more of what she could do. She could hear the faint rustle of papers and the gentle shifting of chairs. As the audience adjusted themselves, the room was filled with small noises, but none of them distracted her. She kept thinking about the piano, about how she wanted to make it sing in ways no one expected. The simple tune had been a warm-up, a soft introduction. Now she needed to let the music grow, to let it tell a story that went beyond the notes printed on paper. When the host called her again, she felt a spark of determination. She walked back to the piano, feeling a mix of nervousness and exhilaration. The audience watched, curious and slightly puzzled. They expected another simple tune, perhaps something equally ordinary. But she had other plans. She took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the familiar texture beneath her touch. This time, she allowed herself to play with more freedom. The tune began to shift, small changes at first, subtle variations that caught the ear. She added tiny trills, delicate pauses, and slight alterations in rhythm. The melody seemed to dance, twisting and turning in ways that made the listeners lean in closer. Some faces lit up with recognition, others with surprise. She felt a thrill knowing that she had caught their attention, that the music was no longer just a simple tune but a living, breathing story. She noticed the people in the front row, eyes wide and focused, completely absorbed in the sound. Their reactions fueled her confidence, and she let herself explore further. She added a gentle crescendo, a slow rise in intensity that made the piano resonate through the hall. The audience seemed to respond instinctively, holding their breath, waiting for what would come next. She could feel the energy of the room, a silent communication between herself and everyone watching. With each passing moment, the simple tune transformed. What had started as a basic melody now carried layers of emotion and complexity. She experimented with timing, playing certain notes slightly longer, letting others fade into silence. The hall was filled with sound, rich and warm, each note carefully placed yet free-flowing. It was as if the piano itself had become a storyteller, and she was simply the voice guiding it. The audience began to murmur softly, impressed by the changes. Some leaned closer, as if trying to catch every detail. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them without distraction. She noticed a few people tapping their fingers subtly, almost unconsciously, keeping time with the rhythm. Her heart swelled with quiet pride. She could feel the connection growing stronger with each passing moment. She paused for a brief moment, letting a single note linger in the air. The room seemed to hold its breath, caught in the delicate silence. Then she continued, moving into a slightly faster rhythm, playful yet precise. The simple tune had now become a journey, rising and falling, light and dark, joyful and thoughtful all at once. She had never felt so alive at the piano, so aware of every sound and every response from the audience. People started whispering to each other, amazed at the transformation. "Is she really improvising?" one asked softly. "It started so simple, but now it's incredible," said another. She smiled quietly to herself, not looking up, letting the music speak for her. She knew that the power of the performance lay in the subtlety, in the way a simple melody could evolve into something unexpected and beautiful. She felt her fingers glide effortlessly across the keys, each movement natural and confident. The piano responded to her touch, every note clear and resonant. She could sense the audience leaning forward, drawn in by the story unfolding through sound. Her mind was completely focused, yet she felt a strange sense of freedom, as if she were floating above the keys, letting the music flow through her rather than from her. As she continued, the tune became more expressive, carrying emotions that words could never capture. Joy, nostalgia, longing, hope, all of them found a place in the melody. She could see the effect on the listeners. Their eyes softened, their breathing slowed, and some seemed lost in thought, taken on a personal journey by the music. It was a magical feeling, knowing that her playing could reach into someone's heart in that way. Time seemed to stretch as she explored every corner of the melody. She experimented with dynamics, moving from soft whispers to louder, more dramatic expressions. Each transition was deliberate, yet effortless, like a conversation unfolding naturally. The audience was completely captivated, their attention fixed on the piano and the musician who had taken a simple tune and turned it into something extraordinary. Finally, she brought the melody to a gentle close, letting the last notes linger in the air. She lifted her hands slowly, feeling the weight of the music settle in the room. There was a moment of silence, a pause where the audience seemed to collectively hold its breath. Then, as if waking from a dream, they began to clap, softly at first, then louder, their applause filling the hall. She stood up, a quiet smile on her face, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the room or the lights. She had shared a piece of herself, and it had been received with wonder and appreciation. Walking away from the piano, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The simple tune had served its purpose, opening the door to a larger story that she could now tell. She knew that this was only the beginning of something greater, a chance to explore the full range of her talent and share it with the world. The audience had been captivated, but more importantly, she had discovered a new level of confidence and joy in her own music. Sitting back down in her chair, she listened as the applause continued to ripple through the hall. Other musicians were watching her with curiosity and admiration, and she felt a quiet bond forming with them. Music, she realized, was not just about notes and rhythm. It was about connection, about touching lives in ways that words could never fully express. And in that moment, she knew that she had done exactly that. She sat at the piano once more, her hands hovering above the keys, feeling the familiar coolness and smoothness beneath her fingertips. The audience, already captivated by her earlier performance, looked at her with anticipation. They didn't know what to expect next, and she intended to make it something unforgettable. She could feel a quiet energy building inside her, a combination of nerves and excitement that pushed her to explore beyond the simple melody. She had started with dot as her fingers touched the keys. The melody she had been playing began to evolve naturally. It was no longer just a simple tune. It started to breathe and shift, carrying with it emotions that words could not describe. She added subtle ornaments, delicate flourishes that made the notes shimmer in the air. The audience leaned in, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding before them. The music began to change its pace, slow and thoughtful in one moment, lively and playful in the next. She experimented with dynamics, letting some notes fade into silence while others rang loudly, commanding attention. Each movement of her hands felt instinctive, as though her fingers knew exactly where they needed to go. The piano responded to her touch, producing a sound that was at once delicate and powerful. She could feel the audience reacting to every shift in the melody. Some closed their eyes, swaying slightly as if moved by an invisible current. Others whispered softly to their neighbors, marveling at the skill and emotion they were witnessing. She did not need to look at them. She could feel their attention, their curiosity, and their awe. It was a connection that went beyond words, a silent understanding between musician and listener. Her heart beat in time with the rhythm, and she allowed herself to be fully immersed in the music. She took a simple motif from the original tune and began to build on it, layering harmonies and adding intricate patterns that made the melody richer and more complex. The piano seemed to come alive under her fingers, singing and dancing in a way that captivated everyone in the room. She explored different textures, alternating between soft, gentle passages and bold, dramatic sections. Each transition felt natural, flowing seamlessly into the next. She allowed herself to take risks, adding unexpected notes and rhythms that surprised even her. The joy of creation filled her, and she realized that this was what she had always been striving for, a moment where her music could speak freely, without limits or expectations. The audience could sense the transformation. The simple tune they had first heard was no longer recognizable. It had grown into something far greater, something that carried the depth of her passion and talent. Some people were on the edge of their seats, completely absorbed, while others held their breath, not wanting to miss a single note. She smiled inwardly, knowing that she had captured their hearts just as she had hoped. She played with rhythm, letting it ebb and flow like a gentle wave. Certain notes lingered, creating a sense of anticipation, while others rushed forward, bringing excitement and energy to the piece. Her hands moved swiftly and gracefully, each gesture purposeful yet natural. The piano became an extension of herself, a voice through which she could express everything she felt. The hall seemed to resonate with her music. The sound filled every corner, bouncing off the walls, wrapping around the listeners, drawing them into her world. She could see their expressions change, eyes widening in surprise, lips parting in awe, some leaning forward as if trying to get closer to the source of the beauty they were hearing. She felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything she had ever experienced. This was the moment she had been waiting for her entire life. As the piece continued, she introduced subtle improvisations, delicate shifts in melody that added depth and character. The music flowed effortlessly, carrying with it a sense of narrative. It told a story of joy and sorrow, of hope and longing, all woven together in a tapestry of sound. She could see the audience responding emotionally, some visibly moved, some completely mesmerized by the unfolding masterpiece. Her fingers danced across the keys, executing rapid sequences with precision and grace. She was no longer thinking about each note individually. Her mind was fully immersed in the music, guiding her hands as if they were an instrument of their own. The complexity of the piece grew, but it never felt forced or artificial. Every note was intentional, every pause meaningful, creating a harmony that captivated everyone listening. She experimented with chord progressions, blending unexpected harmonies that added richness to the sound. The piece shifted between moods seamlessly, moments of gentle reflection, followed by bursts of exuberance. The audience was spellbound, caught up in the roller coaster of emotions that the music carried. She could feel their hearts responding, their breath quickening during intense passages and slowing during softer ones. At one point, she allowed the music to slow dramatically, each note lingering like a whispered secret. The hall seemed to fall silent, every listener completely absorbed in the delicate soundscape. She could sense the anticipation building, knowing that the next shift would surprise and delight them. And when the melody surged again, it did so with a power and intensity that made the audience gasp. Swept away by the sudden brilliance, her performance was a delicate balance of control and freedom. She could guide the music with precision while also allowing it to evolve naturally, responding to the energy in the room. She felt a deep connection to the piano, to the sound, and to the people who were experiencing it with her. The music was no longer just notes on a page. It had become a living, breathing entity, carrying emotion, beauty, and expression in every vibration. The audience reacted instinctively, some tapping their fingers, others leaning forward, their eyes wide with amazement. She noticed a few people whispering softly, exchanging glances that conveyed disbelief and admiration. She smiled slightly, though her focus remained on the piano. The joy of sharing this moment, of creating something that moved others, was more important than any recognition. As the piece approached its climax, she allowed the music to swell, filling the hall with a rich, powerful resonance. The harmony was complex, yet each note was clear and distinct. Her hands moved with speed and precision, weaving intricate patterns that created a sense of awe. The audience was completely captivated, swept up in the emotional journey she had crafted. Finally, she guided the piece toward a gentle conclusion, letting the last notes linger in the air like a soft echo. She lifted her hands slowly, feeling the final vibrations of the piano settle into the room. The hall was silent for a moment, as if everyone was holding their breath, reluctant to let go of the beauty they had just experienced. Then, as if breaking a spell, applause erupted, filling the space with warmth and appreciation. She stood quietly, a serene smile on her face, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The simple tune that had begun the performance had grown into something extraordinary, something that had touched the hearts of everyone present. She could feel the energy of the audience, their admiration, their wonder, and it filled her with a quiet pride. She had shared a piece of herself, and it had been received with awe and gratitude. Walking away from the piano, she felt lighter, freer, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The music had allowed her to express emotions she had long kept hidden, and the response of the audience had confirmed the power of her gift. She knew that this was only the beginning, that there were countless melodies waiting to be discovered and shared. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a voice, a medium through which she could connect with the world in ways words could never achieve. As she returned to her seat, she took a deep breath, feeling the lingering resonance of the music still vibrating in her chest. She noticed the looks of admiration on the faces around her, the quiet conversations that spoke of surprise and amazement. She felt a profound sense of connection, knowing that through her performance, she had reached into the hearts of everyone listening. And for the first time, she realized that her music had the power to truly move people, to create moments of wonder and joy that would not soon be forgotten. The moment she lifted her hands from the keys, there was a brief pause in the hall, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then, slowly, a ripple of applause began, soft at first, uncertain, as though the audience needed a moment to fully grasp what they had just witnessed. Then the clapping grew louder, stronger, more confident. People were on their feet, some clapping with wide smiles, others covering their mouths in astonishment. The energy in the room was electric, buzzing with awe and admiration. She sat quietly, letting the applause wash over her, feeling a warm glow spread through her chest. She had always dreamed of touching people with her music, but experiencing it firsthand was unlike anything she had imagined. She could see the faces around her, the wonder in their eyes, the genuine emotions they were displaying. Some were teary-eyed, moved by the depth and beauty of what they had just heard. Others were exchanging whispers, their voices filled with astonishment. The host of the event approached her, his expression a mix of surprise and admiration. "I didn't expect that," he said, his voice trailing off. "You took a simple tune and turned it into something extraordinary." She smiled politely, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She didn't need grand compliments. The connection she had made with the audience was reward enough. But hearing his words made her realize that her music had broken through expectations and left a mark on everyone present. People were approaching her now, quietly at first, then more confidently, sharing their impressions and gratitude. One person said, "I've never heard anything like that in my life. It felt like the music was speaking directly to me." Another added, "You made a simple tune feel alive, like it had a story behind it." It was beautiful. She nodded and thanked them, feeling a sense of humility. It wasn't about impressing anyone or seeking validation. It was about the pure joy of sharing her passion and connecting through sound. A few young musicians approached, their eyes wide with curiosity and admiration. "How did you do that?" one asked softly. It felt like the piano was telling a story on its own. She smiled gently, recognizing the same spark she had felt when she first discovered music herself. "I just let it speak," she replied. "I let the music guide me and tried to feel it, not think about it too much." The young musicians nodded, inspired and encouraged, silently learning a lesson that no book or lesson could teach. The audience slowly began to settle, still buzzing with excitement. Conversations were soft, filled with awe and reflection. People were sharing their favorite moments, describing the emotions they had felt, and marveling at how a basic tune had become a breathtaking performance. She watched them, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. Her music had reached people, touched them in ways she had only hoped for. The host returned to the stage, smiling as he addressed the audience. "I think we all just witnessed something truly special," he said. "A performance that took us by surprise and showed us the beauty of music in its purest form." The crowd nodded and murmured in agreement, their energy still vibrant and warm. She remained seated, quietly observing the room, her heart full of gratitude. This was more than a performance, it was a shared experience, a moment of connection between musician and audience that could not be measured or replicated. As she stood up and stepped away from the piano, She felt the weight of what had just happened settling in. It wasn't just about the applause or the admiration. It was about the impact her music had on others. She had taken a simple melody, something ordinary, and transformed it into a journey that moved people, inspired them, and left a lasting impression. She realized in that moment that her talent was not just a personal gift, it was a way to touch lives, to communicate emotions that words could not capture. People continued to approach her, some with tears in their eyes, others smiling broadly. "That was magical," one person said softly. "I've never felt anything like it." Another added, "You turned something simple into something unforgettable. Thank you for sharing that with us." She responded with quiet gratitude, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had shared a piece of herself, and in return, she had received the acknowledgement and connection she had longed for. As the event began to wind down, she reflected on the experience. The audience had been captivated, but more importantly, she had discovered a new level of confidence in her own abilities. She had trusted herself to explore the music freely, to let it grow and evolve naturally, and the result had been transformative. She realized that the real magic was in the connection, the ability to reach into someone's heart. With a simple touch, a delicate note, or a well-placed pause, the host approached her one last time, extending his hand with a warm smile. "You have a gift," he said. "I hope you will continue to share it. The world deserves to hear more of what you can create." She accepted his words with humility, feeling the weight and truth of them. She knew that this performance was only the beginning, that there were countless melodies, countless stories waiting to be told through her music. The thought filled her with anticipation and excitement. As she left the hall, the sounds of conversation and laughter following the event lingered in her mind. People were still talking about her performance, sharing the memory, and praising the unexpected brilliance they had witnessed. She felt a sense of joy and purpose, knowing that her music had made an impact, however small or large. The experience had changed her perspective on what it meant to perform, to share, and to connect through art. Walking outside, she felt the cool evening air brush against her face, carrying with it a sense of renewal. The streets were quiet, the world moving on as it always did, but she felt different. Her heart was lighter, her mind clearer, and her spirit invigorated. She had faced the audience, taken a simple tune, and turned it into something that resonated deeply with everyone present, and in doing so, she had discovered a new confidence in herself and her abilities. As she walked home, she thought about the young musicians who had approached her, the expressions of wonder on their faces, and the whispered words of admiration. She realized that her performance had not only touched the audience, but had also inspired others to explore their own creativity, to trust in their own abilities, and to let their own voices be heard. The thought filled her with a quiet pride, a sense of responsibility, and a renewed sense of purpose. By the time she reached her home, the evening sky was dark, dotted with stars. She sat quietly at her piano once more, not to perform, but to reflect. Her fingers rested on the keys, feeling the familiar comfort and potential of the instrument beneath her hands. She thought about the journey she had just experienced, about the simple tune that had opened the door to a masterpiece, and about the connection she had forged with her audience. It was a moment she would never forget, a turning point in her life and in her music. She understood now that music was not just a skill or a talent, it was a language, a way to communicate emotions and stories that could touch people's hearts. Her performance had been more than notes and rhythms. It had been a shared experience, a bridge between herself and everyone who had listened. She felt grateful, inspired, and ready for whatever came next, knowing that her music had the power to change lives, including her own. The days after the performance were filled with a quiet excitement that followed her everywhere. Word had spread quickly about the event and the unexpected brilliance of her performance. People she had never met before reached out with messages of admiration, and invitations to play in other venues began to appear. It was both thrilling and overwhelming, but she welcomed it with open arms, knowing that this was the moment she had been waiting for her entire life. She reflected on how far she had come, from practicing alone in her small room to captivating an audience with a piano that seemed to sing under her touch. The simple tune she had begun with had been transformed into something much greater, a journey of music that touched hearts and created a shared experience that none of them would forget. She understood now that her music had a power beyond her imagination, a power to inspire, to move, and to connect people across space and time. The invitations kept coming, from local gatherings to more prestigious events. Each new opportunity brought a mix of excitement and nerves. She knew that she could no longer hide behind the simplicity of basic tunes. Audiences would expect more, and she was ready to give them something extraordinary each time. She spent hours at the piano, exploring new melodies, experimenting with harmonies, and finding ways to convey emotions through every note. As she prepared for her next performances, she thought about the audience at the first event. She remembered their faces, their reactions, the way they had been drawn into the music. That memory stayed with her, guiding her practice and inspiring her to refine her craft. She realized that music was not just about technical skill. It was about understanding the emotions of the listeners and finding a way to touch their hearts. Every pause, every flourish, every note carried meaning. She also thought about the young musicians who had approached her afterward, full of curiosity and admiration. She hoped that her performance had inspired them to explore their own potential, to trust in their own abilities, and to follow the music that lived inside them. It was a reminder that her talent was not just for herself, but for others as well. She wanted to share her gift in a way that encouraged and uplifted everyone who heard it. The first few invitations took her to small, intimate venues. She was careful to choose pieces that allowed her to connect deeply with the audience. She noticed the subtle signs, the leaning forward, the quiet sighs, the smiles of recognition that showed her music was resonating. With each performance, she grew more confident, more at ease, and more willing to explore the full depth of her abilities. Her playing became more than a demonstration of skill. It became an experience, a conversation with everyone who listened. One evening, at a slightly larger venue, she stepped onto the stage, feeling the familiar mix of nerves and excitement. The audience was different, but the feeling was the same. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the piano and the music guide her. As her fingers touched the keys, the room was filled with sound, rich and expressive, carrying a story that everyone could feel. She was no longer just performing. She was sharing a part of herself with the world. After each performance, she took the time to observe and reflect. She listened to the audience, watched their reactions, and considered how the music had affected them. She wanted to grow, to improve, to create moments that would linger in the hearts of everyone who listened. Each applause, each whispered comment, each expression of wonder fueled her determination. She realized that this was not about fame or recognition. It was about the connection, the shared experience, and the joy of creating something that could touch people's lives. Her confidence grew with each performance. She experimented more boldly, blending different styles and exploring improvisation. She allowed herself to play with freedom, trusting her instincts and letting the piano guide her. The audiences were captivated, not just by her skill, but by the emotion and authenticity she conveyed. She understood that true music was not about perfection. It was about feeling, expression, and the courage to share a part of oneself with others. As months passed, her reputation grew. Invitations came from distant towns, and eventually from larger cities. Each new venue brought new challenges and opportunities. She remained humble, remembering the first small gathering where she had turned a basic tune into a masterpiece. That memory kept her grounded, reminding her that every performance, no matter the size of the audience, had the potential to touch hearts and create meaningful connections. She also began to mentor young musicians who approached her for guidance. She shared her experiences, emphasizing the importance of emotion, connection, and courage in music. She encouraged them to explore their own creativity, to trust their instincts, and to find their unique voices. Watching them grow and develop was a source of joy and inspiration, reminding her of the impact one performance could have beyond the moment itself. She continued to practice diligently, exploring new compositions and refining her techniques. But she never lost the sense of joy and wonder that had first drawn her to the piano. Each note was an opportunity to express herself, each melody a chance to touch the hearts of those listening. She learned to embrace mistakes as part of the creative process, understanding that imperfection often brought its own beauty and authenticity. Over time, she realized that her journey was not just about performing. It was about sharing, connecting, and inspiring. She had discovered that music could create moments of magic, moments where people could feel deeply, think deeply, and connect with something greater than themselves. Her own life had been transformed by that realization, and she wanted to continue sharing that gift for as long as she could. Looking back on the first performance, she could hardly believe how much had changed. The simple tune she had begun with had unlocked a world of possibilities, a world where her music could reach beyond the walls of her room and touch the hearts of strangers. She had discovered her voice, her confidence, and the profound power of connection through art. Every performance since then was a continuation of that journey, a testament to the courage to take risks, to trust in oneself, and to embrace the beauty of expression. She knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt, and more opportunities to grow, but she felt ready for them, strengthened by the experience of the past performances and guided by the love of music that had always been at the center of her life. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that every day, every practice, and every performance was a step toward deeper understanding, greater skill, and more meaningful connection. As she sat at the piano in her quiet room one evening, she reflected on the journey so far. She remembered the nervous anticipation, the audience's surprise, and the overwhelming joy of sharing her gift. She thought about the people who had listened, who had been moved, and who had been inspired. She realized that her music was not just a personal pursuit. It was a way to touch lives, to create moments of beauty, and to inspire others to explore their own passions. She began to play softly, letting the notes flow naturally, feeling the music resonate through her and into the room. Each note was a reminder of the journey she had taken, the connections she had made, and the possibilities that lay ahead. She smiled, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. Her music had become a voice, a bridge, and a source of joy for herself and for everyone willing to listen. And she knew that the journey was only beginning, with countless melodies waiting to be discovered, shared, and celebrated.